Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about lands. Yep, that's right, another pre-modern deck tech thingy-mabobber, and we're going to be doing that. Going to be looking at playing a bunch of lands. Who doesn't like playing a bunch of lands? That's always pretty great. So yeah, let's friggin' get into it. All right, so this is originally a legacy deck called 43 Lands. Back in, oh boy, this is a long time ago. At least over a decade ago, maybe even longer. I'm pretty sure it's like 2008 or something, 2009. Gosh, it was a long time ago. Anyways, it's a novel deck that just plays a bunch of lands. Specifically, just a bunch of lands, tutor up different lands to do different land things. Um, Legacy deck, of course, played like Life from the Loam and some other things. Originally, it started out as a more mid-rangey kind of thing, at least like a lot of Life from the Loam style decks did, but eventually morphed to become more of this lands, well, to become like lands, right, which is just conglomeration of different strategies and stuff. So, but here we got some of that deck available. Of course, unfortunately, no Life from the Loam. Very sad, very sad. What a great card. But we do have a lot of lands, and there are some decent lands that we can play with. So that's kind of nice. Really gonna be focusing on like board control, killing stuff on the board, maybe some pseudo locks and things like that. Um, yeah. And then we got some interesting sort of new tech-ish kind of stuff. Um, and we got a lot of lands. Oh boy, we got a lot of lands. So many lands. So many lands. All right. Okay. So my version of this a little bit land heavier than the other versions. And this is more or less built pretty heavily off the old, well, the versions that people have been playing in pre-modern. Um, I don't really like Gamble too much. I'm not a huge fan, especially without Loam itself. Um, yeah, so I just got more crop rotations. I like more crop rotations. That's a sweet card. So I got some extra lands too. Another big difference. Some people play like a bunch of reflecting pools, just to sort of reduce the number of non-hands. I just replaced a forest for a reflecting pool to reduce the number of like times you'll draw double pool or whatever, and like some colorless lands or whatever, sort of to make it a little less wonky. But yeah, so a lot of this stuff is not too wonky. Glacial Chasm, very good. Well, this of course combined with crop rotation, which maybe I should even be playing a fourth, but obviously crop rotation kind of sucks against like control decks. Getting your crop rotation countered is, well, it's obviously bad, right? I don't think I really need to say too much there, but yeah, crop rotation's good. So like if someone tries to pop you or something, you can rotate for Chasm to prevent all the damage. Very good. Definitely buy you like at least probably around like four turns, depending if you have another one and whatnot and all sorts of other things. But um, yeah, yeah, real good stuff here. The Brimstone Portal, I'm not 100% sure about. There's already a bunch of colored lands in here, so again, still a little unsure about that. But most everything else, I have Ice Flow and a Core Haven. Obviously, because I think it just makes more sense to play. For example, Core Haven can tap flyers, so reanimated Chroma or something like that. But Ice Flow can shut them down permanently, so I was like, well, split the difference, play one of each. Um, the Singleton Dust Bowl, of course, is just an additional LD card, so on top of the Waste and Ports already. Barbarian Ring is like, okay, like it can kill a thing, right? So in combination with everything else, it's like fine, but certainly not the most exciting. But like I said, there's a Darth sort of lands that you can play in this, of utility lands. There's a lot of stuff that's not that great, but the layer lands are actually very good because they trigger Horn of Greed and stuff, and all that kind of good stuff. Deck typically kills with Seismic Assault, of course, but I added some little bit of spice in here. Of course, you know I love spice. So yeah, but yeah, this is again not too much different really than a lot of these other decks. Um, for the most part, a lot of the really good payoffs and different cards you can play in these decks are like a million different colors. I mean, obviously, like Seismic Assault, again, very, very good payoff for playing a pile of lands and, Horn of Greed and stuff. Triple red. Trade Routes is blue, and Exploration is green, and so it's like, yeah, you basically gotta go full 5-color, which of course has its own benefits, which we can talk a little bit later. But yeah, nothing too weird here. I mean, got your full multicolored suite of lands that are available. All your 2 targets for crop rotation and stuff. Yeah, basically that's it. So there you go. All right. So now we have really the big core of the deck, right? So excuse me. Oh gosh. Exploration and Horn of Greed. So whenever you play a land, not when it comes into play, but you have to actually like play it, you can draw a card. Of course, your opponent can draw a card too, but again, your deck is really built around maximizing card draws. So yeah, Exploration Horn of Greed, very, very good. And that's really the big engine of the deck. Of course, then we also have Trade Routes. Nah, it's all the same. And that, of course, will let you bounce your own lands, and then you can discard lands to draw a card, but even just bouncing them to replay them with Horn of Greed. Of course, Summer Bloom is a big part of this as well. Summer Bloom letting you play 3 more lands. Again, very good with Horn of Greed, very good with ramping. Quite nice. I suppose you could also play Mox Diamond in here. I'm not 100% sure about that, since there's like, maybe it could be good, honestly, now that I think about it. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Again, there's a lot of cards to sort of play with in here, but yeah, a lot of them are. I feel like there's probably like 4 set flex slots I can mess around with, change things up, because your core package of Horn of Greed, Exploration, and Light and Tutor Trade Routes. Because without Trade Routes, you're gonna run out of like stuff to go back to your hand. It's not like you have a bunch of fetch lands and dual lands and loaming and so on and so forth to return to your hand to Seismic Assault people like you could in 2007 Legacy or something. So there's, you kind of need the Trade Routes there. Of course, in the Trade Routes itself is protection from Wasteland. Quite good. So there's that. Of course, the Enlightened Tutor gets you, of course, all of your artifact enchantments and does a lot for your sideboard stuff too, as well. But the one thing I wanted to play quite a bit was to give you a little bit more resiliency, a little bit more, maybe just, I guess, like an alternate win condition, because I guess typically you'd rather just go for the big Seismic Assault win with like Trade Routes, right? So have like a pile of lands in play, return them, hold your hand, and then just start throwing them at people. But the Nintuko Monastery is quite good because it's a huge creature land, right? When you can activate this, when you have Threshold, that's a huge amount of damage. This will basically beat everything in combat, really, except for a couple things. And a 4/1, or excuse me, a 4/4 with First Strike is pretty incredible. And of course, it produces mana, comes into play untapped. It's quite a good, it can be a real sneaky target, like mid-combat, rotate away a land, Monastery, activate. It's like, oh boy, here we go. So I like Monastery. I think it's a good addition. It's way better than something like Gaia's Blessing, which just like, yeah, it's pretty weird. Not a fan of Guy's Blessing, especially just one blessing. If you were like looping blessings or something, or you really expected to go long, but I figured you need more control elements to really try and get to that point, which is not really present in the deck. You have to change some other stuff. Anyways, yeah, I like Nintuko Monastery. It's definitely something I'm looking to check out and to see how good it is. It's a sweet card, very powerful. Alright, since we're playing 4 Enlightened Tutors, a lot of our sideboard can basically be piles of artifacts and enchantments and stuff. But as well as we have the 5 color lands, the rainbow lands, so we can play pretty much whatever we want. But of course, I couldn't even begin to suggest a sideboard that you should play because it's like, again, everything's so wide open, it's hard to suggest. But a couple of things really stood out to me that I liked quite a bit. First and foremost, something like Argivian Find is very good. This is just basically extra copies of destroyed or countered or whatever artifacts and enchantments. And this is pretty great. It's basically an instant speed regrowth in this deck, you know, for all the cards you really want to play. I think it's pretty good, So I can see playing 1 or 2. It's quite good, you know, against control decks. Of course, you could play something like Red Elemental Blast, Duress, Mana Leaks, stuff like that. All sorts of things. But it would take a really long time to test. So I'm not 100% sure. But of course, you know, obviously a deck full of non-basics, really minus the 1 forest, which I thought was just kind of just better than play. I mean, I guess you could just play another Painland or something, but I just test the single forest instead. I'm not sure how big of a difference that's going to make, but against a pile of non-basics, people may or may not have stuff like Back to Basics or Blood Moon. Or Fracture's pretty good against those decks, or all sorts of other nasty enchantments, and you have so many lands. Or Fracture's quite good against dealing with that kind of stuff. So that's something to keep in mind. Or Fracture, quite good. I remember playing it in like Keeper, like 21 years ago. It was a good way to deal with Blood Moon out of the Ophidian decks. So that's cool. So it's good to have these kind of cards in mind. And of course, we got some really good cards against aggressive decks, which can be kind of a pain. No Maze of Ith, so we'll have to rely on some of these other enchantments. So Humility, of course, this is good against creature combos as well, so maybe even more than just one. Propaganda, good against creature swarms, and it just sits there and just sits there and tells them to hack off, you hackers. And of course, Engineer Plague against all sorts of nasty tribal decks, or even maybe you could board it in against like regular creature decks, but it kind of depends because those are kind of like if you're just looking to buy some like a turn or two or some extra turns or whatever just by shrinking their guys, that could be okay too, but it's again something to keep in mind. All right. So, you can play a lot of different cards in your sideboard, and that is awesome. What should you play? I don't know. It depends on what you play against. Stuff like Defense Grid is great against counterspell decks. You know, there's stuff like a Sylvan Library, again, also good against decks with a lot of counter magic. Choke against, you know, again, just this complements the mana denial element. Same thing, I guess, like Armageddon. If you're worried about your opponent's Armageddon, so you can play Sacred Ground, you can do so much. There's so much to play. And of course, any artifacts and enchantments you can easily tutor up, so playing just 1 or 2 of those is not too bad. But yeah, the deck kind of performs in like a combo-y fashion, just playing and drawing and getting your Exploration Horn of Greed / Summer Bloom, getting that set up, drawing a bunch of cards, and then like going into the trade routes Seismic Assault combo, right? So being able to, you know, after you have all your lanes in play, you've drawn a bunch of cards, then you can return them all to your hand and then discard them all, or well, you only need to discard 10 to Seismic Assault, but yeah, that'll obviously kill someone. Quite good, pretty sweet, definitely pretty nice. And of course, there's also a Nantuko Monastery, if you know, because it can create like odd situations where like, should I board out my removal? Should I keep it in? You know, which is can be very awkward for people, right? Like, oh, what do I do? You know, I mean, you don't need to activate the Nantuko monasteries. So I like creating those kind of situations, those very difficult, sort of almost like a Sophie's choice. Maybe that's the wrong metaphor here, but anyways, yeah. So one of the nice things, we can just waste import people out of the game. Quite nice. I guess you'll get a lot of wins off of just being a big ol' LD deck, so that's kind of nice. And there's, I feel like there is quite a few. I'd say at least like 4 slots probably that are good cards you can play. Um, I feel like, yeah, there are about probably around 4 flex slots, stuff that I could see not, that you could replace with something else. So I feel like there's a little bit of innovation, a little bit of extra stuff to do. I mean, again, if you can play all 5 colors of cards, like, that's a big Scryfall search, so that'd take a while. But um, yeah, I think the main deck is pretty good, just the general stuff that's going on, you know? So that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys stayed the entire time. I hope you enjoyed it. Look at all these deck tech thingies that I'm doing. Oh my gosh, so much stuff. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Glad you liked it. So yeah. So thanks for stopping by. Hope you guys had a nice day, and have a nice day.